What if I told you that Saudi Arabia built an underground river longer than the Nile buried beneath desert sand that delivers 627 million litres of desalinated seawater daily to transform one of Earth's harshest deserts into green agricultural zones visible from space? It sounds like desert fantasy, right? Well, Saudi Arabia actually completed this hydrological miracle, and the result is so unreal that it's revolutionizing how desert nations approach water security while creating invisible infrastructure that sustains 35 million people. But here's what makes this story truly extraordinary. This isn't a natural river at all, but the world's most sophisticated underground water network that operates entirely below the sand dunes you see from above. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of the Saudi Arabian desert, surrounded by endless sand dunes stretching to every horizon. The temperature exceeds 50 degrees soon, and there's no visible water source for hundreds of kilometers. Yet directly beneath your feet, buried 5 meters underground, flows a massive pipeline carrying enough fresh water to fill an Olympic swimming pool every 3 minutes. This underground river isn't a single pipe. It's a network of interconnected pipelines totaling 8,700 kilometers in length. If you could unbury and straighten this entire system, it would stretch longer than the Nile River, making it the world's longest artificial water distribution network ever constructed. The engineering is almost incomprehensible. The system maintains consistent water pressure across distances that would normally require dozens of pumping stations in above-ground systems. Temperature control mechanisms prevent the water from heating in desert conditions that can melt asphalt. Leak detection systems monitor every kilometer to ensure no precious water is lost to the sand. The scale is absolutely mind-blowing. The network delivers 627 million liters of fresh water daily, enough to supply a city larger than Los Angeles. The water originates from massive desalination plants on the Red Sea and Persian Gulf coasts, where seawater is converted to drinking water before being pumped hundreds of kilometers inland through this underground river system. Since 2009, this invisible infrastructure has transformed Saudi Arabia's relationship with water. Cities that once faced chronic shortages now have unlimited clean water. Agriculture that was impossible in the desert now flourishes in massive irrigation zones. Green corridors have appeared across the desert, visible in satellite imagery as impossible oases created by human engineering. But perhaps most remarkably, the underground river operates almost invisibly. Unlike surface canals or exposed pipelines, this buried network requires minimal maintenance while protecting precious water from evaporation in the brutal desert sun. The system loses less than 1% of transported water, far better than traditional distribution methods. The transformation challenges everything hydrologists thought possible in desert water management. What began as Saudi Arabia's desperate solution to water scarcity became a model for how desert nations can create water security without depleting natural resources or depending on increasingly unreliable rainfall. But to understand how Saudi Arabia came to build a river longer than the Nile beneath their desert, we need to go back to the water crisis that threatened to make the kingdom uninhabitable. Saudi Arabia occupies some of Earth's driest territory, with average annual rainfall below 100 millimeters across most of the country. The kingdom has no permanent rivers, no natural lakes, and underground aquifers that are being depleted 10 times faster than nature can replenish them. For a rapidly growing nation with 35 million people, this represented an existential crisis. The numbers told a story of impending catastrophe. Saudi Arabia's population was growing by 2.5% annually, while available water resources were declining. Urban demand for water was increasing by 7% per year as living standards rose and cities expanded. Industrial water needs were growing even faster as the kingdom diversified its economy beyond oil production. Agricultural water consumption was unsustainable, with farming using 85% of total water supplies, despite contributing only 3% of GDP. Farmers were drilling wells thousands of meters deep to access ancient aquifers that would never be refilled once depleted. The depletion rate suggested complete exhaustion of these fossil water sources within 20-30 years. Traditional solutions were failing completely. water conservation campaigns couldn't reduce demand enough to address fundamental shortages. Wastewater recycling provided some relief, but couldn't meet growing needs. Cloud seeding experiments showed minimal results in regions with so little atmospheric moisture. International water imports were considered, but proved economically and politically unsustainable. Depending on other countries for water supplies would create strategic vulnerabilities that Saudi Arabia couldn't accept. The costs of importing sufficient water exceeded the value of most economic activities the water would support. The social implications were becoming urgent. Summer water shortages forced rationing in major cities. Agricultural communities faced bankruptcy as groundwater depletion made farming economically impossible. Rural to urban migration accelerated as water scarcity made traditional lifestyles unviable. Economic development stalled as businesses couldn't obtain reliable water supplies for operations. Foreign investment declined as water insecurity made long-term planning impossible. The Kingdom's Vision 2030 economic diversification plans seemed impossible without solving fundamental water scarcity. Environmental degradation accelerated as desperate farmers overpumped aquifers, causing land subsidence and ecosystem collapse. Oases that had supported civilization for millennia were drying up as water tables dropped below root zones of ancient vegetation. That's when Saudi engineers proposed something that seemed both logical and impossibly expensive. Instead of trying to find more water in the desert, why not bring ocean water to the desert through the world's most ambitious pipeline network? The proposal faced immediate criticism. Traditional engineering wisdom said that pumping water hundreds of kilometers would be prohibitively expensive. Economists calculated that desalinated water couldn't compete economically with groundwater mining, despite the long-term sustainability problems. Environmental groups worried about the energy consumption required for desalination and water transport. International water experts questioned whether such a massive project could be maintained reliably, given the harsh desert conditions and technical complexity. But Saudi planners had advantages that made the impossible seem achievable. Oil wealth provided financial resources for projects that would bankrupt other nations. Engineering expertise from the petrochemical industry could be applied to water infrastructure. Most importantly, the alternative was civilizational collapse as water resources were exhausted. The National Water Distribution Network project launched in 2004 with goals that seemed fantastical. Construct 8,700 plus kilometers of underground pipelines, integrate multiple desalination plants into a unified network, deliver 627 plus million liters daily to all major population centers, and create water security that would last for centuries. The construction of Saudi Arabia's underground river represented engineering challenges that exceeded those faced in building the world's tallest buildings or longest bridges. Workers had to bury thousands of kilometers of massive pipelines through some of Earth's harshest desert environments, while maintaining precision that would allow the system to function flawlessly for decades. The pipeline specifications themselves were extraordinary. Individual pipes measured 2 to 3 meters in diameter, large enough to drive vehicles through. They were manufactured from special steel alloys and coated with protective layers that could withstand 50+ years of desert conditions, while preventing any corrosion or contamination of the water. Excavation operations resembled military campaigns as crews worked across the kingdom simultaneously. Trenching machines carved channels 5 meters deep through solid rock, sand dunes, and everything in between. The depth was critical. Surface pipelines would lose 40% of water to evaporation in Saudi heat, while buried systems lost less than 1%. Each pipeline section had to be precisely positioned and connected to ensure perfect water flow across hundreds of kilometers. Welding specifications exceeded those used in submarine construction, as any failure point could cause catastrophic water loss in the desert environment. Temperature management systems were integrated throughout the network. Without active cooling, water temperatures could exceed 40 plylas by the time they reached inland destinations, making the water unsuitable for many uses. Heat exchange systems maintain comfortable water temperatures despite brutal desert conditions. Pressure management required sophisticated engineering as water had to be pushed uphill across mountain ranges and through elevation changes exceeding 1,000 meters. Pumping stations were strategically placed to maintain optimal pressure while minimizing energy consumption. Leak detection systems used acoustic sensors, pressure monitoring, and satellite analysis to identify any water loss within minutes. In desert conditions, even small leaks could waste millions of liters before being discovered through traditional monitoring methods. The integration with desalination plants required coordination between coastal water production and inland distribution. Advanced control systems managed water flow based on real-time demand, ensuring optimal efficiency while preventing any supply interruptions. Quality control exceeded drinking water standards, as the system had to deliver perfectly safe water regardless of pipeline length or environmental conditions. Multiple testing points throughout the network ensured water quality remained constant from desalination plant to final delivery. Construction logistics challenged conventional project management, as the sheer scale required coordination across thousands of work sites simultaneously. Supply chain management ensured that specialized pipeline sections, equipment, and materials arrived at precisely the right locations at the right times. Environmental protection during construction prevented desert ecosystem damage while managing construction waste that could contaminate the very aquifers the project aimed to protect. Sand dune stabilization prevented pipelines from being buried under shifting sands. By 2009, the first major sections became operational, delivering desalinated water to Riyadh and other central cities. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Water shortages that had plagued cities for decades ended overnight. Residents experienced reliable water supply for the first time in living memory. Agricultural zones began development as reliable water access enabled farming in areas that had never supported agriculture. Irrigation systems delivered precise amounts of water to crops, creating productive farmland in impossible locations. Urban development accelerated as water security removed fundamental limitations on growth. New residential areas, commercial centers, and industrial parks emerged in locations that would have been unthinkable without the water network. The economic transformation exceeded all projections as reliable water access enabled industries that had been impossible. Food processing plants, manufacturing facilities, and service industries expanded rapidly once water security was assured. International recognition grew as engineering organizations studied the project as a model for addressing water scarcity in arid regions. The technical achievements demonstrated that desert water scarcity could be solved through ambitious infrastructure rather than population limits or economic constraints. But the most dramatic results were yet to come as the completed network began transforming Saudi Arabia's desert landscape in ways that were becoming visible from space. The full impact of Saudi Arabia's underground river, documented through comprehensive monitoring from 2015 to 2024, revealed transformations that exceeded every prediction about desert water management and agricultural development. Agricultural zones created by the water network now cover over 40,000 square kilometers, an area larger than Switzerland. Satellite imagery shows green circles and rectangles scattered across the desert like impossible gardens, each representing irrigation systems fed by the underground river. Crop production increased by 300% as reliable water enabled year-round agriculture and high-value crop cultivation. Saudi Arabia transformed from wheat importer to exporter within a decade, achieving food security that seemed impossible given their desert environment. The economic value generated by reliable water access exceeded $200 billion since network completion. Industries that require large water volumes, food processing, chemicals, pharmaceuticals, established operations that would have been impossible without the underground river. Urban quality of life improved dramatically as water security eliminated shortages and rationing. Swimming pools, parks, and gardens became common in cities that had once struggled to provide basic water services. Tourism increased as improved amenities attracted visitors who had avoided water-scarce destinations. The environmental impact was equally remarkable. Green corridors along the pipeline routes created habitat for wildlife that had been absent from desert regions for generations. Birds, insects, and small mammals colonized irrigated areas, creating unexpected biodiversity in impossible locations. Temperature moderation occurred in areas with intensive irrigation as evaporative cooling from watered vegetation reduced local temperatures by 2 to 3 degrees during peak summer months. The microclimate changes improved living conditions while reducing energy consumption for cooling. Groundwater preservation succeeded as the underground river provided alternative water sources that allowed ancient aquifers to recover. Wells that had been pumped dry began refilling as reduced extraction allowed natural recharge processes to operate. Social stability improved as water security removed a fundamental source of conflict and migration pressure. Rural communities that had faced collapse due to water scarcity experienced renaissance as reliable water enabled sustainable livelihoods. International interest exploded as water-scarce nations studied Saudi techniques for potential application. The success demonstrated that technological solutions could overcome natural limitations in ways that changed how desert nations approached development planning. United Arab Emirates launched similar underground water networks based on Saudi experience, creating integrated water systems across the Emirates. The shared engineering expertise accelerated development and reduced costs through economies of scale. Qatar adopted Saudi pipeline technologies for their own water security projects, creating redundant systems that could withstand any disruption. The regional cooperation in water technology development enhanced overall water security across the Gulf. Jordan explored underground water networks as solutions to chronic water scarcity that threatened social stability. The Saudi model provided frameworks for implementing large-scale water infrastructure despite limited financial resources compared to oil-rich neighbors. Egypt studied underground pipelines as alternatives to Nile dependency, recognizing that climate change and upstream development threatened traditional water sources. The technological pathways developed in Saudi Arabia offered alternatives to impossible diplomatic situations. North African nations, including Libya and Algeria, investigated underground water networks for connecting coastal desalination to inland population centers. The engineering lessons from Saudi operations proved applicable across diverse desert environments. Chile adapted Saudi technologies for addressing water scarcity in the Atacama Desert, demonstrating that underground water networks could function in different climate zones. The international technology transfer expanded the potential applications beyond Middle Eastern contexts. Australia studied underground water networks for addressing agricultural water security in drought-prone regions. The Saudi approach offered alternatives to controversial water allocation schemes that had created social conflicts. The technological innovations developed for the Saudi network found applications beyond water distribution. Pipeline materials and monitoring systems proved valuable for other industries requiring reliable long-distance transport of liquids and gases. Climate change adaptation planning increasingly incorporated underground water networks as solutions for regions facing increasing water stress. The proven technology provided confidence that desert regions could maintain habitable conditions despite changing climate. Energy efficiency improvements continued as operators optimized pumping schedules and pressure management to minimize power consumption. Advanced control systems learned usage patterns and adjusted operations to reduce energy costs while maintaining service quality. Water quality remained consistently excellent as sophisticated treatment and monitoring prevented any contamination or degradation during transport. The system demonstrated that underground pipelines could maintain drinking water standards across unprecedented distances. Maintenance costs proved lower than projected as buried pipelines protected from sun exposure and physical damage required minimal intervention. The infrastructure durability exceeded design specifications, suggesting operational lifetimes extending beyond initial 50-year projections. System expansion continues as additional desalination capacity comes online and new pipeline branches extend coverage to previously unserved areas. The modular design allows incremental growth that matches population expansion and economic development. Today, Saudi Arabia's underground river operates as one of the world's most successful large-scale infrastructure projects, demonstrating that human engineering can create resources where nature provided none. The invisible network buried beneath desert sands continues delivering 627 plus million liters daily, sustaining 35 million people in conditions that would otherwise support only sparse nomadic populations. The transformation from water scarcity to water abundance represents one of the most dramatic environmental modifications in human history. International delegations regularly visit Saudi facilities to study technologies that are becoming global standards for desert water management. The engineering expertise developed through the Underground River project has become valuable export knowledge, supporting Saudi economic diversification goals. Research continues on enhancing system efficiency and expanding capabilities to meet growing demands. Next-generation desalination technologies promise to reduce energy costs while increasing water production, enabling even greater agricultural and urban development. The project has proven that desert nations need not accept water scarcity as permanent limitation. Ambitious infrastructure investment combined with technological innovation can create water security that enables development and prosperity in the world's harshest environments. From water crisis to water abundance, from desert limitations to agricultural surplus, from national project to global model. Saudi Arabia's Underground River demonstrates that human determination, backed by engineering excellence, can create rivers where none existed. The world's longest artificial water network has become a template for addressing water scarcity across arid regions worldwide, proving that desert transformation is limited only by imagination and willingness to invest in ambitious solutions. What other natural limitations do you think could be overcome through similarly ambitious infrastructure projects?